Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Time to Calibrate. Bob here, and with Brent from the Calibrated Wrist. And we're missing somebody today, Brent.
Yes, we are. Marc's off gallivanting in Greece. He's left us behind to hold down the fort.
He did tell me that he would have much preferred to be here with us today, but
he actually sent me a message this morning saying, I think maybe you got it too. Just say, man, I wish I was there.
Yeah, I'd trade places with him.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so Marc is in Crete right now. You ever been, Brent?
I've been to Greece, but not to Crete itself. When I was 18 years old, I did a backpacking tour of Europe, and around November, it was getting pretty cold, and my friend and I, we headed south. And so we stayed on the island of Corfu, actually, for quite a while before heading over to mainland. But I have never been back since. So that's quite a long time ago.
Yeah, we went, my wife and I and my sister-in-law and my niece and nephew as well. We went the year before last, and we spent a good chunk of our time in Crete, where Marc is actually, and loved it. Absolutely loved the island. But yeah, so we were going to talk a little bit about what we're up to right now with summer closing. I know you've been up at your cottage a couple of times in the last few weeks, sort of taking it all in, that nice weather.
Yeah, in fact, we even added an extra trip up there just because we were, looking at the calendar and seeing summer closing down and everything. And in fact, that's probably where you're recording from today, isn't it?
It is, yeah. We're at the cottage it's the long weekend this weekend, but we extended it and made it even a longer weekend and came up on Wednesday and doing a little fishing, doing a little filming for an upcoming video, and just having a grand old time. I was telling you before we started recording, so a couple of lakes over, a friend of mine, I've known this guy for years, and I knew he owned a couple of watches, a couple of Breitlings, but I didn't really quite realize how into it he is or was. And I think it's sort of something that's developed over the last few years, but he's been into modding, building watches lately, Seiko mods, all of that kind of stuff. And one of the local restaurant owners who he's friends with has him commissioned for him to do a watch for another gentleman that's just a few lakes over from us, Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary.
Oh, my goodness.
So I don't know Kevin, and neither does he, but he had the watch. I saw it. It's sort of a kind of a Yachtmaster build, red strap, of course, but he has this thing built, and he's just waiting on the call from the restaurant owner that's nearby. For next time Kevin's in the restaurant, he's going to have my buddy come over and present him this watch. So I thought that was kind of neat.
Man, the things that you can fall into sometimes. What a small world.
So it's crazy. It is so crazy. He's actually coming back tonight too. So always fun to have somebody around to chat watches with. That's for sure.
Absolutely. What's the name of the lake that you're on, Bob?
So our lake is a really small lake. The famous lake, which I think is actually where O'Leary lives, is called Joseph Lake. My lake's called Haggart Lake. Very small. It's about 1 kilometer long, maybe a dozen or so cottages on it. It's a quiet lake, which is great. We're just south of Parry Sound. Parry Sound.
Yeah, I know the area really well. I think you and I live on very similar lakes. My lake, Lake Aloyda, is also maybe sort of 1 kilometer across and 2 kilometers long, and not more than maybe 15 homes on it. So it's nice to have that kind of place to escape to, for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
We were up in your area last year, and we'd stopped in Parry Sound at that Trestle Brewery. It has that beautiful building overlooking the sound. And if I'm not mistaken, I had one of those South Channel hazy IPAs when I was there. It's one of my favorite things to do when I'm traveling around Ontario, is to hit all those microbreweries.
I haven't been to that one. I'm curious now if they carry that maybe at one of the local beer stores, which I'll be attending. I'll take that one.
So today, Bob, what have you got on wrist?
Hey, I have some projects on the go. So G-Shock, standard square. It's next to my Black Bay. I've talked about this in a video recently on the channel, but next to the BB Pro, it's the Square. Is easily my second most worn watch right at the moment. So,
yeah, what a great piece.
How about yourself?
Well, given what you and I are going to talk about today, I thought that I would put on the MIDO Ocean Star 39, actually, which is one of their latest releases that's kind of celebrating the 80th anniversary of the collection. So that's what I have on today. And I'm looking at the dial now. I really love this crazy wave 3D kind of texturing that they've done there. If you look really closely at it, what's very cool is that it's 3 dimensions in all directions. So you can actually see that the text and the markers vary in height given the waves that are around them. It's really quite something.
Wow. That's interesting. I'm looking at it right now, actually. Which color do you have?
The one that I've got on wrist this morning is the gray dial, the one that's got the sort of gradient fade on it. I do have the blue here as well, and then I have that champagne too. In fact, my wife wore the champagne to the recent cliff diving event in Montreal, and I wore the gray dial.
So I guess we should maybe talk about the cliff diving event. That was last weekend, I think, that you attended.
That's right. Yeah, it was not too long ago. In fact, it's still pretty strong in my memory. It was quite an experience.
So tell me kind of like how that all worked. Like it's a 3-day event, I think, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You guys were there on just the Sunday, or?
That's right. We were there for the finals. So the divers had already done 3 dives, and we knew where divers were sitting in the standings. And in fact, on both sides, the men's and the women's, the race for the top spot was very tight. There were sort of 3 guys who could have walked away with it. And on women's side, it was really tight race between 2 divers. And so the crowd was enormous. There was probably, I would say, it was in the tens of thousands for sure. They were lining the docks in Old Montreal. They were along the rooftops in the VIP section. It was an amazing atmosphere. There was even a point where some sort of stray clouds brought in a storm for about 30 minutes, and there was a delay, and I don't think anybody left. It was electrifying. It was really something.
I know, like I just from I read your article yesterday that you'd written on the calibrated wrist, and I know one of the on the women's side, it was a local that won apparently.
Yeah, Molly Carlson is a really interesting character. She has, I think, almost 500,000 followers on Instagram. She's got more than that on TikTok. I think probably all told, she's probably got an audience of about 6 million. She always wears pink. And so in that crowd on the weekend, you could see pink plastered throughout. She had so many fans that were there. Now, she's not a native Montrealer. She's from Thunder Bay, I believe, but she has kind of chosen it as her home. It's where she trains. So it really was like a hometown victory for her.
And then on the men's side, I've heard that he kind of has a connection to Montreal, if I'm not mistaken, too.
He's got a connection both to Molly and to Montreal. Yeah, absolutely. Aidan Heslop, he's actually Welsh, and he dives for Great Britain. In fact, I do believe he's got a world championship under his belt. He currently sits atop the point standings after his victory in Montreal, and he beat out the Romanian, who's the reigning champion, Popovici, I think his name is. But yeah, he is also living in Montreal. He and Molly are a couple. So it was kind of one of those fairy tale storybook endings. Honestly, it was like the 2 hometown heroes brought home the hardware, and they're also sweethearts.
Wow, I actually didn't make that connection. That's really cool. So another thing, as a person that is somewhat afraid of heights, I heard that you walked the platform.
We did. So the great thing was that Matt Dennison and also Hayden Sequeira from MIDO had set all this up, and Matt was kind of like our gracious host that weekend. And so he secured a couple of spots for 2 individuals to walk the platform, and we were there with about 6 others. But they were not willing really to give it a go. And like you think of the number 21 meters, for example, and you think, oh, yeah, that's not too bad. But 21 meters is actually 7 stories high. And although they'll strap you in, you feel it. Like, honestly, the vertigo just rushes up at you. I'm not a big fan of heights, but what really gets me about heights actually is watching other people around heights. I feel like, oh my goodness, I don't have control over them. So it kind of gives me an increased sense of vertigo. But my wife, who's also the videographer for us, she took the second spot, and the two of us went up, and Dale from Red Bull was up there. He strapped us in, and we had a good 10 minutes on the platform. We were able to take some really great shots, and we filmed a little bit of video that will be coming out in an upcoming YouTube clip for us. But yeah, it was something. And to know that was the first platform, and that the men jumped higher at 27. I don't know if I would have had it in me to walk that one.
Oh man. I would have loved to see you do a big cannonball off of it. And you would have got some views though on the YouTube channel.
Yes. I don't know if when you were reading the article, if you saw, but when you jump off of that, you accelerate at approximately, I think it's 15.8 kilometers a second, which is pretty close to a supercar's acceleration. And before 3 seconds expires, which is all it takes between the top and the bottom, you will have reached 85 kilometers an hour. It's insane to think about that. And so what's going through those athletes' minds, I can't even imagine, because they're in such amazing physical shape just so that their bodies can withstand the impact of hitting the water. In fact, when they do, it's like an inverted mushroom cloud. If you look at sort of underwater photography, it's like a bomb blast going on underneath the water, and they have to sort of at that point, hold their arms out so that friction slows them down. But it's an incredible feat of athleticism, really.
So I'm just doing a little Google search here. So the highest that I've ever jumped from a surface into water was at Rick's Cafe. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No, I'm not.
So Rick's Cafe is in Jamaica, and it's famous for having this. It's a bar, but there's also cliff diving, which is maybe not the best combination. But the height from the top one, the top area you can jump from is 35 feet.
Okay.
I did it, and it was, first of all, painful. It was painful, and I was wearing my quartz tuna. This is maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe not quite that long ago. It actually just about ripped it right off my wrist, the impact. Like, it actually fully opened the clasp, and luckily it didn't fall off my wrist. But yeah, it's quite the thing jumping from even that height. So I can only imagine 7 stories.
I know. No, it really is. And, here we have Charleston Lake Provincial Park, and around there on Charleston Lake, there's some popular cliff diving spots, or cliff jumping spots, really. They'd be around 30 feet tall. But I'll tell you a funny story that actually involves my time in Greece. So this ties everything together here. But when I was 18 years old, my friend Bob and I went on a day trip from a place called the Pink Palace, and they took us out by boat to this little island shaped like a turtle's back, and then beside it there's a plinth that rises about 70 feet out of the water. And so what you could do is go out there and drink for the day and snorkel and everything, and then, as you say, not a good combination, if you want, climb that plinth and jump off. So alcohol obviously gives you a little bit of that bravado that you might not otherwise have. So I climbed the back end of that, and about halfway up, I started to think, what am I doing? And I thought, I can't possibly climb back down. It's way too dangerous. So I was kind of, in it no matter what happened. So you jump from about, I think it's close to 60 feet. So not quite at the top, but there's sort of kind of like a natural outcrop. And I got there, and the tide and the waves are kind of, breaking that surface tension. So it's not quite as dangerous. But I looked down and I thought, well, there's nothing to do. We can't turn around now. And I did it. And only time actually that I've ever done anything quite that crazy, I think.
Did you have like a pretty like landing, or did you kind of like
I was a little off to the left, I think. I remember kind of my elbow smarting, but like I say, fortunately, because of the way the water was moving, it didn't have that same sort of static surface tension that would have made it really, really like concrete.
Yeah. So I'm just, I have these, I'm really interested to see these MIDOs in person, the new Ocean Star 39. I'm looking at I called it when we were speaking the other day, a stand dial, the champagne. It just looks like the desert to me. Like, you know what I mean? It's got a really interesting look.
Absolutely.
I actually have one of these on. I have one of these on the way from Sam at Gem Bijou. I know you work with him sometimes too. So I'm not sure which color it's sending, but I'm looking forward to getting a little bit of time with it and putting together something for the YouTube channel, Instagram, all of that stuff.
That sand dial in particular, unlike the other ones, it has no gradient, but because of the way the texture works, there are these shadows that are cast on the dial that just sort of give it a kind of natural coloring that of course changes every time you move the watch, but it's really quite attractive.
Yeah, I'm particularly drawn to that one right now. As I'm perusing the interwebs here.
Well, this is probably a good point to talk about MIDO watches, actually. So that's kind of that was our plan here. Our plan B, because we are going to talk with Jason Hutton, but we're saving that for the next episode when Marc is back. But we thought maybe we'd do our first ever brand episode, and so why not talk about MIDO? So, Bob, what's your experience with MIDO so far?
So I've had a few. I've actually never owned a MIDO. I've had quite a number of them for reviews, for videos, for some photography. But I used to work with Sam at Gem Bijou as the store manager. And I can remember MIDO sort of, first of all, came out with a couple of releases. One was the decompression timer that was very hot at the time. They also came out with the GMT, sort of the Batman motif. Also an Ocean Star, which was a Traveler's GMT. But I can remember as these watches were coming in and just flipping over the price tag, kind of as you're displaying them and opening them up. And I just remember looking at the price tag and going, geez, like these are like, I'm thinking this should be, we're talking Canadian dollars. I'm expecting 2,500 or 2,900 and it's 14 or 1,200. You know, I just always felt like they seemed to have really good value.
Yeah, I feel the same way entirely. When the three that came in from the new Ocean Star line, I opened the box and saw that they were $1,400. And I was looking at that and thinking, man, the finishing is incredible. And like we're just talking about the champagne dial. It's got that PVD gold bezel, etc. The bracelets have sort of micro adjust. And you know what? They have this newer movement in them as well, and it's called the Caliber 72. And my guess here is that it's similar to what Longines have been putting in their Conquest and Spirit lines, and so it's a thinner movement, and the case height is only 10.5 millimeters, which is incredibly slender for a watch with water resistance like that. So you have these sort of like Goldilocks kind of dimensions, 39 millimeters in diameter, 46 millimeters lug to lug. So, you know, it really, really wears nicely on the wrist.
I'll tell you one experience that I've had with them. So working in a watch shop, you're not dealing with watch guys most of the time. You know what I mean? Maybe like a 1 out of 10 is a watch guy. So when people are coming in, they're asking for Swiss made. Like, I want a Swiss made watch. I just graduated university, or I'm getting married, or, you know, and they're not into watches. So I'm like instantly taking them to either in this price range to either MIDO or Hamilton, or kind of the two, Tissot too. And a lot of the non-watch people would really gravitate to MIDO. So you know what I mean? Like, there's something about some of their designs, like there's obviously a lot of different designs that they have and lines that they carry or that they have. But people, I found that the non-watch people, when you put them in front of MIDO, really gravitated to them.
Yeah, that's an interesting commentary because, you know, in the enthusiast sphere, MIDO isn't necessarily on the tip of anybody's tongue. And yet, I'm sure that from your experience, what you can see is that when somebody doesn't necessarily know exactly what they're looking for, what they're really hoping to find is something that hits them aesthetically. And I really think that MIDO has a number of great designs, particularly in the Ocean Star line, but also these recent releases. I think 2023, that Multifort TV Big Date came out. And I think that one's like their right-hand man now. It's going to be, it is already a huge hit. Tyler Frederick from Horology Obsessed, I know that he's one of your drinking buddies as well. He reviewed he reviewed it for us, and it was actually, Sam from Gem Bijou who did send it along. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But when you look at that watch on the H-Link bracelet, they have the vibe of that integrated sports watch, but of course they're not. And you can get them on a fitted rubber strap. And because they're square, the dimensions are fantastic. Again, just kind of like a little over 39 millimeters lug to lug, 40 millimeters in diameter. And they have that athletic lug width of 22 millimeters. So, they really they have a huge presence, and yet they're not overly large. In fact, I think they're under 12 millimeters in height too, something like 11.5 millimeters in height. So beautiful, beautiful watches. They have those gradient dials that have that kind of subtle texturing as well. And so they have that they have a very, kind of sporty look, screw down crown, 100 meters of water resistance. And I think they're selling like hotcakes.
Yeah. So I did get to experience, thanks to Sam. Again, we're talking about Sam a lot on here. If you guys are shopping watches in Toronto, unpaid, plug for Sam. Gem Bijou is a good place to go. But so I did get to experience that blue gradient dial on the rubber, though. I haven't seen it. I've seen it on the bracelet, but I hadn't. The one that I had in for video was on the rubber, and even. Again, I'm just on the MIDO, some $1,500. What? Like, there's no such thing like a proper big date like that. There's no such thing at that price range. You know what I mean? Like it. Yeah.
No, and
they're a really nice watch.
Absolutely. I was talking with the brand manager, and I told him, for me, it's the one with the orange bracelet and the orange strap, and he said, you know what? It's the brown dial rose gold PVD that is impossible to get a hold of anymore. People just love that watch.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. Kind of mimics the color of another famous watch. Maybe that's why. I'm not sure.
I think you might have hit a nail there. Yeah. What's interesting, is that, MIDO's an old brand, like I think 1918, so 106 years old this year. And they've got some big celebrations. I mentioned the Ocean Star, the 80th anniversary, which is an interesting anniversary, by the way. Really, I think it's the 65th anniversary. The first Ocean Star came out in 1959, but they must have been thinking about it a long time in advance because they actually patented the name way back in 1944. And then they had also patented the really nice starfish logo way back in 1942. So it's interesting to see that they must have been planning for this, and building on water resistance, because they came up with in the 30s, they came up with a really interesting system called the Aquadura system that involved, the use of gaskets and stuff, and that single shell case and all that kind of stuff. So, they hadn't a dive watch at that point, but they were already working on water resistance. So they must have had in the back of their minds, this idea for the Ocean Star a long time running.
I'm curious, like we were talking again the other day on MIDO a little bit, and how they're not out there as much, at least in North America. I wonder if they're a little more prevalent in Europe compared to here.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Like, they didn't even open their regional office here in Canada until 2015. And even though it was earlier in the States, I think it was around 2006 there as well. So if you think about, the history of Swiss houses, that's really not that long ago. And so they are sort of a new kid on the block. And you can kind of see it too with their ambassadorships, for example. Like having just been at the Red Bull event, they obviously do some sponsoring with Red Bull, but they sponsor two of those athletes as well, Jonathan Paredes from Mexico I think they've been with him since 2019, but most recently they just started working with Aiden Heslop, who was the winner in Montreal. And so you can see that in spite of the fact that it is an old house, that they're kind of making their inroads with a young crowd. So they present themselves in North America like a fresh face in many ways, you know? And they also, they don't do a lot of ambassadorships, but I noticed on their website that they work with a guy named Brody Pawson as well, who's a parkour athlete. And so again, you kind of see that making inroads into that sort of youth culture. But when you take a look at their price tag, that makes a lot of sense too, because you're getting a lot of watch, like you mentioned, fantastic finishing, solid movements, etc. But you're getting it at an entry-level price really for the Swiss watch world.
Yeah. I can't think of a better value Swiss made watch right now. Yeah, they're kind of it to me. Like, and I feel like these kind of releases too, they can't help but sort of become a little bigger, a little more well known, especially in the watch community. Like, they're just coming out with some great stuff.
Yeah, you know, the first time I heard people in the enthusiast sphere talking about them, I believe it was that GMT that you mentioned not too long ago. I heard it on the Grey NATO, and they were talking about it. And I think it came out originally like at a 44 millimeter size. And they were saying, oh boy, if this came out in 42, I'd be all over it. Or if it came out in 40, etc. And of course, now they've done that. They have issued so many great GMTs in that Ocean Star line in particular over the last few years. I had one in here just recently. It's a special edition, they call it. It looks a lot like the one they did in the limited edition for Hodinkee, but instead of the sort of baton markers, it has this sort of shark teeth theme that's going on with it. But again, you know, you're looking at, in Canadian dollars anyway, $1,700 for a Flyer GMT with that jumping hour. Fantastic finishing, comes on that 11-row beautiful mesh bracelets. I mean, like you say, incredible value.
Yeah, I am definitely a fan of the brand. Anything else you wanted to chat about when it comes to the event that you attended there last weekend? Did you guys get to meet any of the divers?
So yeah, you know, like it was an incredible experience all around, of course. And there was a guy, Eric Flasher. I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name, but he works with the sort of events team, and he met us at the venue, which is right down at the Grand Quai in the Port de Montreal. And he took us all through behind the scenes. We got to meet the crew that does the filming. We got to see the crew that's doing the live streaming. We got to see the guys who are the judges, including some former Olympians who are doing the judging. And we got to chat with them. We got up close and personal with both Molly Carlson and Aiden Heslop. And so we've got some great footage to go into that YouTube video I was mentioning. And, you know, they're just, what struck me the most about everybody that was there, whether they were on the Red Bull team, the MIDO team, or the Montreal event management team, was that they were just like this big, happy, energetic family. And, you know, when you think about a competition and athletes, you figure that, well, you know, they can't be on friendly terms because, you know, they're about to go out and compete against each other and hopefully, you know, beat one another. And yet, if you watched that event from my vantage point, which was right above where the athletes were kind of in their warm-up area, every single athlete watched every single jump, whether it was male or female, and they cheered and clapped no matter what happened, whether the dive was a roaring success or whether it was a near miss. They were fantastic. They were hugging each other as they came out of the water. And that included people who were neck and neck for the title race. So, and when the women were jumping, I think that Molly Carlson hugged every single person that came out of the water. It was just such a fun event for that reason too, you know, to see that. So yeah, we got to do a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and we had a really nice VIP vantage point where we could do some photography and some video. And there wasn't a person that we met that didn't make time for us.
I just have to say one thing. Your wife is your videographer, right?
That's right.
For YouTube.
Yep.
If you ever need a camera number 2 guy, Tell me. I want to go to this stuff. Yeah, yeah, it looked like a lot of fun. I was following along on your Instagram and stuff while it was happening. But how do they? One last question on that event. How do they? Because I've seen lots of clips of that, over the years, like on YouTube. And do they score that sort of like they do Olympic diving, like your clean entry, like the clean motion of the trick, so to speak, that you're doing, or is it sort of like that? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Every single dive has a difficulty rating. So to the judges, that means absolutely nothing. They don't grade it at all in difficulty. That's sort of predetermined. There's a difficulty rating that will be added to the score. So what the judges are looking for are all those things that you just mentioned, essentially. Was there any balking before the dive began? Did they enter obviously feet first? Were their arms down? Because it's quite a deduction if your arms are not completely down when you enter the water. And then of course they're looking for the cleanliness of the different rolls. There are something like 9 different possible dives. Like you can sort of do like a running jump, a standing jump. You can do it backwards. You can actually do it from a handstand position, which I have got to say, Bob, is the most interesting thing to see. Somebody attempting a handstand 27 meters in the air before they actually do the dive, and I'm thinking, as we all were, I can't even do a handstand.
And forget about it. We have vertigo as we're getting toward the edge.
That's right.
Doing it upside down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know. That's great. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. So I think we're going to kind of cut this one a little bit short here because I see out the window I have some family showing up to the cottage, and it's about to get a little crazy here.
Well, there's fish to be caught, Bob. There's fish to be caught.
There is fish to be caught, and there is a new kind of beer to be found, too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll have to put that in the show notes, too.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I'll let you know how it tasted after I track it down here next time we talk. But so that is it. Make sure to check out all of Brent's coverage on the Red Bull dive event with MIDO on his Instagram, on the website, as well as that upcoming video. I'm looking forward to seeing that. And that's it for today. Really good chatting with you, Brent, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Enjoy the weekend.
You too. Cheers.